Hi there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. This is the card that we are going to be creating. It's got a very blue theme today. I'm going to start off putting a piece of watercolour paper. This is a Tim Holtz watercolour paper in my mini Misty, and I have this floral stamp set here. I'll see if I can find it on Ali, but I'm not sure if it's still there or not. Any kind of floral image would work really well, and it doesn't necessarily have to be this big because you could repeat stamp it, or even just individual flowers and things you could stamp together to kind of create a bunch would work exactly the same. I have just put some embossing ink on the stamp and stamped it down. I did use my Misty because I wasn't sure if I'd have to stamp it twice, but it seemed to go pretty good the first time round. And I'm putting on some gold embossing powder. This one happens to be from Wow, but anything would work. And maybe even white would work really cool too, but I quite like the gold for this one. And then I'm just using my heat tool to melt all of that embossing powder, and it still looks so pretty when it melts like that. It's very cool watching it. This is sped up, of course, but it is still cool to watch it. Then I have this tag set here, which again is from Aliexpress, and I will try and link it down below in case you're interested. And I am just going to cut out part of this image. Now I don't want it to take up the whole tag because I need room to put a wee sentiment on there. So I have that run that through my die cutting machine, and it's kind of, these tags have a little stitched border to them, so that kind of adds a little bit of fun to the outside. Then, as you can see, this is a Cuttlebug embossing folder. It's the mosaic one. And I'm just going to put a piece of, I think this is the Nina 80-pound paper in here and run it through my Cuttlebug machine. And then that will come out. It's kind of hard to see just with the white, but yeah, if I kind of tilt it a little bit, you can see the pretty pattern that it's made. Now I'm going to use some tumbled glass distress oxide. You could use any inks for this, it doesn't matter, you wouldn't need to use this one in particular, but I am going for a kind of ombre look. I definitely want it to fade out to pretty much white up the top, so I just have a little piece of sticky on my fingers because I don't want any of my fingerprints in the ink. And I decided here I kind of needed to make it a little bit darker down the bottom, so I'm adding a little bit of I think it's Salty Ocean or Broken China, maybe Salty Ocean, Distress Oxide, just to make it a bit darker down the bottom. Then, just to kind of bring the card all together, I'm putting a really light dusting of the tumbled glass around the outside of the embossed piece. Two reasons I like this. One, it kind of brings the card all together, and two, it really makes the embossing show up kind of a lot more defined. Then I'm just going to stamp the sentiment which says "You're in my thoughts," and I've just placed my tag down. It actually didn't stamp perfectly, so I had to go over and stamp it again, but I placed the tag down on an angle, and so that's why the sentiment is now stamped on an angle, because it will eventually look straight when I put the tag on the card, if that makes sense. Now what I wanted to do, I wanted to define the flowers a little bit more, so I started off by adding a little bit of water and trying to blot away the colour. You can see I didn't have a whole lot of success with that, so I actually added some Salty Ocean Distress Oxide, a little tiny dot of water, and I'm also going to add some Perfect Pearls in the Perfect Pearl colour. And I'm just going to kind of basically end up mixing this all together to make a pearlized blue water, essentially. And I am going to paint over the flowers. Now, it kind of doesn't look like too much when I just kind of, when we're looking down on it like this, but when I lift it up in a second and show you on the angle, it looks gorgeous. And I must say, this card looks really, really cool because you can see it there perfectly. It catches the light and it just looks really stunning without being really in your face when you look at the card, if that makes sense. So I ended up going over all of the flowers here, and it just looks, I really like this look. It definitely, yeah, just adds that extra little bit of something. And with the leftovers, I couldn't help myself. I decided to do some splatters. Again, just kind of tying in the whole card with the little pearl splatters all over the place. You could definitely maybe go a little bit darker on the blue that I used for the flowers, but I just really didn't want it to kind of take anything away from the rest of the card, so I didn't want it to be like overpowering. Anyhow, I have a little bit of blue twine here, and I'm just going to stick that through the top of the little tag hole. It really serves no purpose other than being decorative. And then on the back of this, I am going to add some foam. This is fun foam, which I get from Aliexpress. And I just buy the packs of the white because that is the colour that I use most often in my card making. So I'm doing some very rough sort of cutting here just to get the rough shape of the tag. Add a little bit of liquid glue. This one happens to be the Nouveau Deluxe liquid glue. And then I have put some double-sided adhesive on the back of my panel, just doing my usual trick, which I have in all my videos, and adhering that down onto my 110 pound Nina Solar White card base. And there you could kind of see like a little bit of the up-close embossing and the kind of pearl splatters. And then again, adding more liquid glue so that I can add down my tag. And now the sentiment looks straight finally, and cut off a little bit of that string. It was just like a little bit too long. And here I pretty much thought I was finished with my card, and I was kind of looking at it thinking, yep, I like it, it looks complete, I feel like I've done everything. And then I spotted these enamel dots on my desk and thought that they would go really well. They just kind of add a nice little finishing touch to the card, I think, and definitely just, yeah, finishes it off nicely. Thank you so much for joining me today. That is the end of this card, and I hope that I will see you in our next video, and I hope that you might give something similar a go. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye.